When I was 15 years old, my family lived in a creepy old house. Early one morning, I woke up suddenly to find my mom bending over me, staring at me intently as if she was watching me sleep. The light in the room was very dim, but I could see she was wearing a blue top and black pants. She was barefoot and her hands were on her knees. She had a very curious look on her face, as if she was examining me closely. I just turned over and went back to sleep. When I got up a few hours later, my mom was in the living room watching TV. I noticed something that struck me as odd. She was wearing a completely different outfit.
Why did you change?
I asked. She looked at me puzzled. I told her I had seen her watching me sleep, but she had no idea what I was talking about. Finally, it was like a light went off in her head, and she said with a gasp,
Oh God, Melissa. That wasn't me.
This happened back when I was 12 or 13 years old. Now, a little backstory here. My dad and I volunteered at a bird banding station. If you don't know what bird banding is, it's where researchers put small metal bands on the legs of birds and then release them to track their migration patterns. We'd set out mist nets in the woods to catch the birds. We used nets instead of traditional traps so we wouldn't harm the birds. So anyway, the guy who owned the bird banding station and the entire property, let's call him R, would let me wander the woods while he was collecting birds out of the nets. R's property was massive, with woods, countryside, marshland, you name it. Now back to the story. It was a cool summer morning. I was wandering in my usual part of the forest. It wasn't long before I noticed that it was unusually silent, which was odd. I usually hear at least one thrush or blue jay, but there was nothing. All of a sudden, in the distance, I hear what sounds like a distressed baby deer or cat. Being the curious animal lover I was, I followed the noise. However, as I got closer to the sound, it seemed to grow a lot further away. It wasn't long before I came to the edge of R's property. The wailing sounded like it was coming from nearby one minute, from sounding far away the next. Despite being confused and a little creeped out, I still followed it. A few moments later, I came across a small deer blind. I looked inside to see if anyone was messing with me, but nobody was there. When I got a better look at the blind, I noticed something a little bit off about it. It looked like there were massive slashes on the sides. They looked like if a person had slashed them with a knife or an animal's claw marks. But there were no bears in my part of Michigan. Odd. So being the curious 13-year-old I was, I continued on my way to find this distressed animal. I was walking along the edge of R's woods, trying not to go too far. I'm starting to get frustrated. Where the heck was this scream coming from? So being the naive little girl I was, I mimicked the noise right back at the animal, to see if it would show itself. Not a minute passes by, and I hear a noise that I will never forget. It sounded like a dog's growl, mixed with a buck's grunt. No deer sounded like it. Something in my brain told me to get the heck out of there, and I did, leaping over twigs and branches until I'm in R's front yard. As I make my way towards his house, I hear the growl coming from the woods, about 10 meters behind me. So instead, I run towards the research shack, since R wasn't at the house and the doors would most likely be locked. I knew that no one would believe me, so I just said that a deer growled at me. However, I have heard deer grunts and snorts all my life, and they do not even compare to what I heard this animal make. It didn't sound like a coyote or a dog either. Although I never saw anything, I believe that it was trying to lure me off the property to do who knows what. I'm guessing that it may have been a Wendigo, since they can mimic noises of other animals and even voices. I also live near the Great Lakes, a hotspot for Wendigo sightings. Maybe it was even a skinwalker, but they tend to be more in the western states, so whatever is in my woods, I don't know. But anytime I go there, I don't go there alone anymore. Don't just brush off something that seems odd. Always follow your gut.
When I was a child, we lived in an old 2-story house with an attic. One day, I was playing alone in the attic when my older sister came up. She had a strange expression on her face, and she didn't make any noise. She was just standing there, staring at me without blinking. Then, in a calm, monotonous voice, she told me I needed to hang out the attic window. For whatever reason, I obeyed her. I opened the attic window and I got out, hanging on outside with my hands. My father was outside in the garden. He happened to look up and he saw me hanging out the 3rd-story window. He started yelling and ran into the house. He ran up the stairs, into the attic, and managed to grab me before I fell. He pulled me back inside and asked me why I did that. I told him I did it because my sister told me to. The strange thing was, my sister had never been in the attic. She had been downstairs, helping my mom in the kitchen the whole time. My dad had actually passed by my sister and my mother in the kitchen when he was running upstairs to save me. There are only 2 explanations. Either my whole family is lying to me, or a doppelganger took form of my sister and tried tricking me into killing myself. One morning, my brother and I were playing in the kitchen of our old house. We saw our mother come walking down the hallway. She had an angry look on her face. We thought she was coming into the kitchen, but just as she reached the door, she turned left and went into the living room. A few seconds later, we heard my mother's voice. She sounded urgent and she said,
"Will you come here? I need help. Please come here."
We rushed into the hallway, but when we looked into the living room, it was empty.
"Mom?"
We started calling out,
"Mom!"
but there was no answer. We searched the whole downstairs, but there was no sign of her. Then, we went upstairs. When we got to her bedroom, we found her asleep in bed. We woke her up, but when we asked her what she wanted, she didn't know what we were talking about. She said she hadn't gotten out of bed at all that morning. This happened when I was 13. It was summer and my parents took my sister and I on a vacation, where we were staying in a rented cottage. There were 2 bedrooms. My parents slept in one room. My sister and I slept in the other. For some reason, I couldn't sleep, and I just laid there, tossing and turning. It was turning 4 a.m., and it was beginning to get light outside. All of a sudden, I heard the creak of a door slowly opening, and the sounds of footsteps as someone came out into the hallway. I couldn't make out who it was in the dim light. I thought it looked like my mother. But something about her didn't seem right.
Hey, Mom. What are you doing?
I said in a nervous voice. There was no reply. I thought it must be my sister. So I said,
Hey, sis. What's up?
The figure still didn't respond. I had an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. I had no idea why. The figure slowly turned around, and I saw its face. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't my mother, and it wasn't my sister. It looked like a hybrid of both of them, as if their features had somehow been rolled into one. The figure started moving towards me. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. I just lay there and I tried to pretend I was asleep. Then, the worst thing that could have happened. The thing saw me. I saw its face twist into an expression of sheer rage, and when it looked at me, I saw its eyes. They were completely black. My whole body was trembling. Then it opened its mouth. It was unnaturally wide, and it screamed.
No! 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 No!
It kept screaming. As it turned and darted down the stairs into the basement, I heard a door slam shut. I lay there for a long time, just shaking and pinching myself to make sure I was awake. I couldn't move a muscle. An hour must have gone by before I heard a door upstairs open, and my parents and my sister came down for breakfast. I told them what had happened, but they laughed and said I must have imagined it or dreamed it or something. I insisted that we all go down and search the basement, but it was empty, of course. For the rest of the vacation, I refused to sleep on the couch again. Instead, I spent every night on the floor beside my parents' bed.
Hey, this is the Grimtail Brothers. Make sure you like and subscribe for more.